I was caught using AI to write wedding vows and partner walked out of wedding. What to do? The crowd was cheering when she leaned in and whispered, "Did you use AI to write that?" Before I could even breathe, my bride dropped her bouquet and walked away from our wedding. My name's Daniel, and I'm 35 years old. If you had told me a year ago that my wedding would end before the vows were even finished, I would have laughed. Emily and I had what most people would call a storybook romance, two opposites drawn together like gravity. I work in software engineering, spending my days buried in code, logic, and structure. I'm the type who plans everything, measures twice, and speaks once. Emily, on the other hand, is a whirlwind of color and energy. She teaches high school English, loves poetry, and has a fierce belief in honesty, especially emotional honesty. We met 3 years ago at a local community book club. I was the quiet guy in the corner who attended mostly because my coworker insisted I needed a life outside the office. Emily showed up late, apologizing to everyone with that radiant, unapologetic smile of hers. She sat beside me, smelled faintly of rain and coffee, and spent the next hour passionately debating the symbolism of the Great Gatsby. By the end of the night, I was hooked. From that point on, everything about her pulled me in deeper. She challenged me to open up, to feel things I'd buried under logic for years. She had this way of making ordinary days feel cinematic, like life was one long story waiting to be told. When I proposed to her last winter, she cried before I even finished the sentence. We started planning a small wedding at a botanical garden outside Denver. Simple, intimate, surrounded by friends and family. She wanted everything to feel real, nothing fake, nothing exaggerated. That word, real, meant everything to her. She hated filters, pretense, and especially anything that felt artificial. I remember one night she told me, "The best words come from the soul, not from a machine." She was talking about her students using AI for essays, but maybe she was warning me too. Still, I didn't think much of it then. As the wedding drew closer, I found myself staring at a blank document every night, trying to write my vows. Everything I typed sounded stiff, mechanical, like a business email wearing a tuxedo. I'd rewrite, delete again. And every time I imagined Emily's face as she read hers, heartfelt, full of emotion, I panicked a little more. That's when I made a decision I thought was harmless. I opened ChatGPT and typed, "Write wedding vows that sound romantic, emotional and honest." When the words appeared, they were everything I wanted to say but couldn't. I told myself I'd just borrow them, tweak them, make them mine. I didn't see it as deception. I saw it as assistance, but love doesn't understand logic the way code does. Looking back now, I realized that moment, sitting in front of my laptop, letting a machine craft the words of my heart, was the quiet beginning of the storm that would destroy my wedding before it even began. The vows sat neatly folded in my jacket pocket, the crisp paper feeling heavier than it should have. I'd spent nights perfecting every line, convincing myself that tweaking a few words from an AI draft made them mine. It wasn't a lie, I told myself. It was just help, a tool to make me sound more eloquent, more expressive. The truth was, I wanted to impress Emily. She had this way with words, this poetic rhythm that made everything she said sound like a page from a novel. I was terrified of falling short, of looking plain next to her brilliance. The night before the wedding, I lay awake, rehearsing each line in my head, trying to sound natural. But Emily's voice kept echoing in my mind. Real love doesn't need to sound perfect. It just needs to sound true. She'd said that months earlier, but now it haunted me. I tried to push it away. Tomorrow was supposed to be perfect, not messy or uncertain. When the morning sun spilled through the window, the day felt almost unreal. The garden was glowing, the air smelled of pine and lavender, and white chairs lined the aisle like pages of a story waiting to be written. My mother squeezed my hand before the ceremony and whispered, "You're going to be wonderful." I smiled, pretending her words didn't twist the knot in my stomach even tighter. Then I saw her, Emily. She looked breathtaking, her dress flowing like water, her eyes soft but bright. For a moment, everything made sense again. I forgot about the vows, forgot about the secret sitting in my pocket. When she reached me, she smiled, and it felt like home. The ceremony began. The music, the sunlight, the whispers of family. It was all a blur until the officiant announced it was time for our vows. Emily went first. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied as she spoke from her heart. She talked about our first date when I spilled coffee on myself out of nerves. She talked about my patience, about how I made her feel safe and loved in a way she'd never known before. Every word felt alive. Every sentence carried weight. I watched her, mesmerized, as tears glistened in her eyes. When she finished, the crowd erupted in applause, and even I had to blink back tears. Then it was my turn. I pulled out the paper with trembling hands. The sunlight flickered against the page as I began to read. The words flowed smoothly, perfectly crafted. People smiled. A few even wiped tears. But when I looked at Emily, her expression had changed. The warmth in her eyes began to fade, replaced by confusion, then realization. Her smile faltered. Her jaw tightened. She blinked once, then twice, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. When I finished, there was silence. Not applause, not even a sigh. Just silence. She leaned in slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. Did you use AI to write that? My heart stopped. I froze, completely unprepared. I wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, to say anything, but the words caught in my throat. My silence said everything. Her face hardened. I knew it, she whispered. Then louder, trembling. Either speak from your heart or I walk away. The entire crowd fell silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on us, the air heavy with disbelief. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My mind went blank. My hands shook. Seconds passed, each one longer than the last. Then she took a slow, steady breath, placed her bouquet on the ground, and turned away. The hem of her dress brushed the petals scattered across the aisle as she walked off. No yelling, no drama, just quiet heartbreak. I stood there, vows in hand, frozen. Someone gasped. The officiant looked lost. My father stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder, whispering, "Let her go, son." But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. When the ceremony finally ended, guests left in murmurs of confusion and pity. I stayed until the garden was empty, surrounded by silence and fallen petals. That night, I sat in my apartment, still in my suit, staring at the ring that never found her hand. My phone buzzed endlessly, friends, relatives, even coworkers asking what happened. I ignored them all. The next day, I called her. No answer. I texted. No reply. By the third day, she'd blocked me. The quiet felt suffocating. People had opinions, of course. Some said she overreacted. It's just vows, one friend told me. It's not like you lied about loving her. But others were harsher. My sister's words, especially, stayed with me. She didn't walk away because of AI, she said softly. She walked away because she couldn't recognize you in your own vows. And she was right. Those vows weren't mine. They were beautiful, sure, but hollow. They lacked my clumsy honesty, my imperfect warmth. They sounded like a love story, but not our love story. Days passed in a blur. I stopped eating properly. Work didn't matter. Sleep didn't come. Every night I'd replay the moment she asked me that question, the way her voice trembled, the disbelief in her eyes. One evening I took out the paper again. I read it from start to finish. The same perfect lines that once filled me with pride now made my stomach turn. Every sentence sounded fake, empty, lifeless. So I tore it up, piece by piece until the words disappeared completely. That night I opened a blank notebook, not a screen, not a document. Just paper and pen, and I began to write. Not vows, not apologies. Just feelings, thoughts, memories. I wrote about her laugh, the way she'd hum when cooking dinner, the softness in her eyes when she looked at me after a long day. I wrote about how she made me want to be better. The words were messy, the lines uneven, but for the first time, they were real. And as I sat there under the quiet hum of my apartment lights, I realized something I'd missed all along. Love doesn't need to sound perfect. It just needs to be honest, and I had one last chance to prove that to her. 2 weeks passed before I finally decided I couldn't live in silence anymore. I needed to see her. Not to beg, not to defend myself, but to tell her the truth, the kind I should have spoken that day. After a few quiet calls to her family, I learned she was staying with her sister in Oregon. I booked the first flight out. I didn't even pack much, just a change of clothes, her favorite flowers, and a small notebook filled with words written entirely by me. When I arrived, the sky was gray and soft rain fell, the kind that feels more like a sigh than a storm. My heart pounded as I stood on her sister's porch, holding the lilies she loved most. Her sister answered, cautious but kind. She hesitated, then stepped aside. "She's in the living room," she said. My hands trembled as I walked inside. Emily sat by the window, legs curled up beneath her, reading. When she saw me, her eyes widened slightly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt thick with everything we'd left unsaid. "Hi," I whispered. She closed her book gently. "Daniel," she said, her voice even but tired. "Why are you here?" "I needed to see you," I said. "To tell you something I should have said before." She didn't tell me to leave. She just watched, guarded but curious. I took a step closer and held out the notebook. "These are my real vows," I said quietly. "I wrote them myself this time. No computers, no help, just me." Her eyes flicked to the notebook. She hesitated before taking it. Her fingers brushed mine, and even that brief touch sent a tremor through my chest. She opened it and began to read. I watched her expression shift as her eyes moved across the pages. Confusion faded into focus, then softened into something I hadn't seen in weeks. Recognition. I'd written about our first date, about how nervous I'd been, how I'd never met anyone who made silence feel so full. I'd written about her laugh, how it could fill a room and quiet every doubt in my mind. I'd written about how she taught me that love isn't about sounding right. It's about being real. When she finished, she closed the notebook slowly and held it against her chest. Tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time since the wedding, I saw emotion flicker past the walls she'd built. "You should have said these that day," she whispered. "I know," I said, my voice cracking. "I thought I needed to be perfect for you, but I was wrong." "You didn't want perfection. You wanted me." And I let fear write for me instead of my heart. She stayed quiet for a long time. Then she sighed, shaking her head gently. "I wasn't just angry that you used AI," she said softly. "I was hurt because I thought you didn't believe your own words were enough." I felt tears burn behind my eyes. "They are," I said. "And if you give me another chance, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that." The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was calm, fragile, hopeful. Emily looked down at the notebook in her hands, then up at me. Slowly, she reached out and took my hand. No grand forgiveness. No promises. Just a touch, small, trembling, but real. And in that moment, I knew she hadn't closed the door forever. Maybe love, I thought, isn't about perfect vows at all. Maybe it's about the courage to rewrite them when you get them wrong. It's been 6 months since that day in Oregon, and life looks different now. Emily and I didn't jump back into wedding plans or post any grand announcements. We decided to slow down, to rebuild, to learn how to speak to each other again, honestly and without filters. The first few weeks were quiet but fragile, like walking across thin ice. We'd meet for coffee, talk about simple things, the dog we wanted, her students, my work. But every conversation carried a silent question. Can we still trust each other? Little by little, that answer started to reveal itself. We began seeing a counselor together, someone who helped us unpack what really happened. It wasn't just about a piece of paper or a few borrowed sentences. It was about what they represented. My fear of being vulnerable, of not being enough. I had always thought love meant presenting the best version of yourself, polished and perfect. But Emily taught me that love isn't an essay to be edited, it's a confession. It's raw, messy, and beautifully imperfect. One evening, we met at the same park where we used to walk our dog. The sun was setting, painting everything in gold and rose. We sat on our old bench, the same one where I'd first told her I loved her. She held my hand the same way she had before and said quietly, "I think I understand you better now." I smiled, nervous. "Does that mean you forgive me?" She squeezed my hand. "It means I see you trying, and that's what matters." Those words meant more to me than any vow I could have written. We're not in a rush anymore. The new wedding date hasn't even been discussed. But we've both agreed on one thing. The next ceremony, whenever it happens, won't be about performance or presentation. There won't be perfect speeches or rehearsed lines. There will just be us, standing there, two people who've learned that truth means more than poetry. In the months since, I've found myself changing in small ways. I write more, real writing, with pen and paper. Letters, notes, reflections. Not to impress anyone, but to remind myself that my words don't have to be flawless to be meaningful. Emily reads them sometimes, smiling at my scribbled handwriting, the crossed-out words, the misspellings. She says they sound more like me now, and maybe that's the point. Sometimes the biggest mistake we make in love is believing we have to sound perfect to be understood. But love doesn't need polish. It needs honesty. It needs the courage to speak, even when your voice shakes. Looking back, I can still see that moment. Her walking away down the aisle, the crowd whispering, my heart breaking. But strangely, I don't see it as the end anymore. I see it as the moment everything truly began. The day I stopped hiding behind perfect words and started learning to live them. I still have that notebook, the one I gave her in Oregon. She keeps it on her bookshelf now. Every so often I see her take it down and flip through it, her fingers tracing the pages. She never says much when she does, but she doesn't have to. The look in her eyes says enough. We're not the same people we were that day. We're quieter, softer, more careful with each other's hearts. Maybe that's what love really is. Not perfection, but persistence. The willingness to rewrite your story until it finally feels true. So, what would you have done in my place? Would you have risked honesty, even if it came out broken, or tried to sound perfect and lost everything in the process? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this.